What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to show you how I made this. Beautiful, delicious, smoky, juicy, barky, fatty, amazing smoked brisket on a pellet grill. That's right, folks. This might be the best brisket I've made on anything other than an offset. Coming up. This is a brisket. Patted dry. And what I got here is a USDA prime brisket. Picked this up at my local grocery store, looking pretty good. Good strong fat cap all the way across the top, weighing in just under 15 pounds, which is good. You know, there's a couple 20-pounders sitting there, but those are pretty gigantic and will definitely add a couple hours to the cook. And today is the much anticipated brisket on a pellet grill. And I have done briskets on pellet grills a couple other times on this channel, but both times I think it was the first thing I threw on each respected grill, and I was just using it like an offset. Same times and temps, which is really not how pellet grills are meant to function. And that's like 90% of the reason I wanted to do the pellet grill series in the first place. You know, get some reps in, put the time in to get to know this cooker, what temperatures it likes to sit at, how the temps swing, how to get the best smoky flavor. And after 3 months of cooking on this pellet grill and putting it through its paces, I've got a much better idea of how it cooks. So today we're gonna see if it pays off and we can make a perfect brisket. But first, we gotta get this thing trimmed up. Starting by taking care of this big chunk of decal fat on the back. Don't need that on there. I'm just gonna go ahead and start kind of pulling on it a little bit, getting that separated. And as always, there's a natural seam in there where it wants to kind of come out on its own. So now we're just gonna follow that. Don't need that big chunk of fat. Go ahead and get that cubed up, save it for sausage making or burgers. And then we'll go ahead and start cleaning up the backside, any of this silver skin and extra fat on the backside we don't really need, while rounding off any edges and corners to make sure nothing burns up on us. And as always, when cleaning up the backside of a brisket, it always helps to cut with the grain of the meat for some nice smooth cuts. Looking pretty good. Go ahead and round this edge off a little bit more. So also at this stage, I'll come through and kind of start taking down this fat cap from this side a little bit, just to give us a nice angle on the other side. And oftentimes on brisket, there'll be this little extra muscle on the end. Sometimes it's really big. In this case, it's really small, but that is just held on between a piece of fat. So we're gonna go ahead and zip that off as well. It's not quite the same texture as fatty brisket, and it gets really dry, kind of chalky, and it'll probably shred if we try to cut through that. But just like that, backside looking good, nice and clean. So we'll flip it over. Always like to kind of push this out, make sure it's laying flat. There we go, now it's laying flat. And then right where the point meets the flat, there's always a big chunk of fat right in here that we can kind of scoop out of there. All fat, real thick, don't need it. Save that for the tallow pile. Then we've got this big point muscle on top here, kind of flapping in the breeze. We want to take that down because it's a lot taller than the rest of this brisket and we want it to be nice and aerodynamic. So just gonna kind of come in there and make people cringe. But again, that is mostly fat. Don't need all of that. Starting to take shape, so now we can go ahead and start taking down this fat cap a little bit, scalping it immediately because you suck. I've been ranting too much. This brisket is getting warm. But again, just taking this down to a nice 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, however much fat you want on there. Usually 1/4 inch is what you're aiming for because you want some fat, but not too much fat. Give the old chud scrape, get rid of any knife marks. Don't think it really affects anything, but just makes it look a little bit nicer. Might help with airflow. But fat cap is looking good. You can see it starting to poke through there and over here a little bit. That's kind of how I know where the fat level is. And we're looking pretty good. Maybe a little thick in the middle here, but I'm not too concerned about it. So now we need to give this thing some shape because obviously this is super thin. We kind of scalped it over here, but we're gonna take this part off anyway because that's just gonna burn up in like an 8 to 12 hour cook. And we're also gonna give this thing some shape and kind of decide how big we want to make it. So I'm gonna kind of come in, starting right around here and kind of scoop it something like that. I gotta do it from this angle. Took a lot of meat off there, but again, that is perfect for sausage or burger making. Round off this tip a little bit, and now do some finishing touches. As you can see, we still got a bunch of fat right here, so we're gonna kind of scoop some of that out a little bit, although that's not gonna be the best slices of brisket on any brisket, but just going around making sure everything is nice and pretty, make sure the fat level is where we want it and the shape is nice, all the corners are rounded off, but this is looking pretty good. But just like that, all trimmed up, pretty happy with how this one came out. Not too big, not too small, good fat coverage all the way across, really nice shape, good and aerodynamic. A little concerned about this point. We might get some curling because it is a little thin and a little long over here. But all in all, backside is looking nice and clean. Good marbling on there. So I think we are set up for a pretty good brisket cook. So now all we got to do is get this thing seasoned up. And per usual, seasoning of choice for a brisket for me is some good old-fashioned Chuds BBQ SPG, designed specifically for brisket or beef ribs or pork butt or any Texas-style barbecue cut where you're trying to get that bark. And we're going to go ahead and start on the backside. Nice, healthy coating all over this thin seasoning. And again, this is 2 parts 16 mesh black pepper, 1 part diamond crystal kosher salt, and 1/2 part granulated garlic. Recipe's right on the back of the bottle if you want to make your own, but I got sick of making it, so we started bottling it. We also sell the salt, the pepper, and the garlic in bulk on our website if you want to just make up your own batch at home. And because this is a very pepper heavy rub, we can go on with a lot of it without over seasoning this thing, which is going to really help give us that bark that we're after on a brisket. And especially on a pellet grill, we need all the help we can get with that super dark, classic Texas style bark. Flip it over, and we'll do the top side as well. And please, folks, don't forget the sides. It's a big piece of meat. It needs all the seasoning it can get. I'm not using a binder today. Not really a big fan of binders. I mean, clearly this is sticking on pretty well by itself, and it's gonna sit there for a minute while we fire up the pit, and the salt will start to draw out some moisture from the meat, acting like its own binder. And also with binders, I feel like it tends to cook on and kind of flake up your bark a little bit, but you know, I've had good results with and without, but generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of binders. There might be too much fat in the middle. And that is a beautifully rubbed brisket to me, but lately I've been wanting a little extra salty pop on my briskets, which is why we made the Chuds BBQ Secret Salt. This is a kosher salt version of your basic seasoned salt, and it works incredibly well on briskets, just for that little extra salty pop and a little extra flavor, but not too much, just a simple dusting. But we're not gonna tell anybody, because it's a secret. Ooh, beautiful. And that is a perfectly rubbed brisket, in my opinion. So now all we gotta do is fire up the pit. Boop. And on the pit we go. Plump this up a little bit. Going on the top rack, kind of in our normal spot, right in the middle. And we're going fat cap up, and the thought there is because we're on the top rack and heat rises, we're gonna get a lot of heat kind of trapped right above the lid, and there's really not much space between the lid and here, which should give us a lot of top heat that's gonna render down this fat cap for us on its way out the chute right over here, which is also top mounted. I've also got the fat cap aimed towards the fire and the lean aimed towards the smokestack here, which I might flip at some point, but mainly because this is a left side brisket or a right side, I'm not sure, but what I mean is the fat side is facing this way, and there's always a hot spot in the back over here. So aiming the fattiest part where the burn ends are towards the hot part of the fire is usually a good idea. Starting out nice and low and slow and smoky, got it fired up to 180 degrees, and we're gonna let it rock there for a good few hours. It's still on the heat up cycle, which should give us a little extra smoke while it gets caught, but for now we're just gonna shut it down and begin the process. So game plan for this cook is we're gonna keep that pit low and slow for the first 3, 4, maybe 5 hours at 180 degrees. But if we look at the thermometer on the top of the pit, it's holding pretty steady right at 225 degrees, which is exactly where I want it to be. If I was cooking this brisket on the offset, I'd also start it out pretty low and slow, maybe around 250 degrees for the first few hours. But that pellet grill seems to cook a little bit hotter and faster than the offset, which is why I brought it down to about 225, and also why I set it at 180, because heat rises and we are on the top rack after all. But keeping it low and slow for the first few hours will ensure that it doesn't cook too quickly and tighten up too much. It gives us plenty of time to get as much smoke penetration on that brisket as possible to make sure it's nice and tender and nice and smoky. As for pellets, I'm using my trusty Smokin pecan shell pellets. I use these all the time and have had great results with them. They're definitely the smokiest pellet that I've used, and they have great flavor. They last a good long time, and yeah, that's my pellet of choice for most things barbecue. And if you want to try these out for yourself, click my link in the description box of this video where you can save a little bit of money on your order. Make sure you use my link, not the Amazon one, because that way I get a little bit of kickback. Appreciate you. But as much as I love the flavor of those Smokin pecan shell pellets, this is a Texas brisket after all, so we got to get some post oak flavor introduced somehow, and I've got an idea for that. One of the nifty things about this pit is that you can remove that plate and you have full access right to the fire pot down there. So what I'm gonna do is every hour or so, maybe even sooner, depending on how quickly these burn up, is I'm gonna grab a little chunk of some post oak wood here and I'm gonna just stick it right on in there. Kind of using the same functionality that you'd get on like a Woodwind Pro, but pretty convenient that you can just drop a piece of wood in there, and that should smolder away and give us some really nice smoke, but because of that fan, it shouldn't burn too dirty, which should work out just fine. And now we'll cover this back up and shut her down. And right off the bat, we're getting a lot of nice smoke coming out of here. One other thing I'm gonna do for this cook is put a drip pan in there to collect any of the drips coming out of this brisket, just to make sure we don't make a big mess. And I'm also gonna put a little bit of water in that pan. And that should add a decent amount of moisture in there, but I'm mostly doing it for more of a heat sink between the heat and the brisket. That way the bottom doesn't get too blasted, because that's the lean part. That can dry out the quickest. So having an extra barrier of water and foil between the heat and the meat should ensure that we get a nice tender bottom. And a little extra moisture never hurt. And I know it's difficult to tell with all the light out here, but there is just an aggressive amount of smoke coming out of this thing. So I think we should be good as far as bark and smoke are concerned. Nice blue smoke too, gotta love that. And there are many ways we could go about cooking this brisket on the old pellet grill. We could do a smoke tube to add some extra smoke flavor. We could do a low and slow overnight cook like I did on the pork butt, which is something I'll probably do in the future. But for this one, I wanted to keep an eye on it, cook it all day long, just to make sure everything goes according to plan. We can add smoke whenever we want to. We can rotate the brisket if some parts are looking dry. We can spritz it if we need to. And also that way when it comes off later tonight, I can do a nice long overnight rest, which will really help keep that thing nice and juicy and nice and tender. But for now, I'm gonna throw a piece of wood on probably every 45 minutes or so. Make sure the smoke is rolling, keep an eye on temps, and just enjoy the day with this very easy brisket cook. So we'll check back in on this in a couple hours. When it comes to a perfect brisket, a very important step is the long overnight rest. And when it comes to the perfect life, the same can be said. And lately I've been getting the best sleep of my life thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, Helix Sleep. Helix Sleep makes premium quality mattresses and bedding customized to fit your needs, conveniently shipped right to your door. Simply head to their website and fill out some basic information like height, weight, and sleep preference, and you'll be matched with the perfect mattress for you. The Helix lineup offers 20 unique mattresses to choose from, and if you already have a mattress, they also offer a variety of mattress toppers as well. The dual comfort mattress topper, the Ergo Align, the premium, and they also make a memory foam premium mattress topper as well. And I've had my Helix mattress for over 3 years at this point, and I gotta tell you, it is the best bed of my life. I have never slept better. I used to have a lot of back pain in my lower back, and somehow it just magically went away, and I didn't change anything other than getting a new bed. But I took the sleep quiz with Brooke, and we were matched with the Helix Sleep Dusk Luxe mattress, which is incredibly comfortable and held up very well over the years with no signs of wear and tear or sag or anything like that. And we also opted to get the Glaciotex cooling cover, which is incredibly important during these summer months because it gets really toasty down here in Texas. And now that summer is here, I plan on spending a lot of time outside enjoying the barbecue season and spending a lot of time poolside grilling up some meat for friends and family. And knowing I can come home and get the best sleep of my life on my Helix mattress is going to make these long, hot summer days a lot better. Not only is the Helix mattress super comfortable, but it's also the most convenient way to order a bed because it comes in a very reasonably sized box, which makes transportation incredibly easy. That's because it comes vac sealed in a very manageable sized box that you simply pop the vac seal, watch it come back to life, and you've got a super comfortable bed in a matter of seconds. I've convinced a lot of my friends and family to upgrade to a Helix mattress, and I have not heard a bad thing about it yet, and everyone I've talked to absolutely loves them. I love my Helix, and I know you will too, so click the link in the description box of this video, taking you to helixsleep.com, where you can save 20% off site-wide. Again, link in description or scan the QR code on screen now to save 20% off site-wide. Thank you, Helix. We are about 6 hours into this cook, a little bit over 6 hours. We've been rocking right between 225 and 250 the whole time, and I really haven't done anything other than periodically coming in and throwing wood chunks underneath, which is pretty convenient. You know, just grab these two racks, slide the whole system over, and then get in there, throw a log in there, slide this back over, collecting all the greases down here, keeping our smoker nice and clean, which has been very nice. And as expected, because of that thin lean, we got a little bit of curling and therefore a little bit of pooling, but that's fine. So I've been coming and tipping the brisket to get rid of that moisture every now and then, but not too concerned about that. But all in all, the bark is starting to look really nice, definitely setting up well. And I just temped it a minute ago when we're about 156 in the point and about 151 in the flat, so pretty even cooking. But just to make sure that we have even cooking, I'm gonna go ahead and rotate it at this point because we do have a hot spot over here and over here, so just to give each piece a little bit of time in each hot spot. But for now, I'm just gonna shut this down, and I think I'm gonna keep rocking at the same temp. And we still got plenty of good blue smoke coming out of there. And I do plan on bumping the temps on that pit here pretty soon. I think I'm gonna go another hour or two at this 180, 225, 250 temp, just to get a little bit more smoke on there and kind of get through the stall a little bit before we start bumping temps. So for now, I'm just gonna keep going at the same temps, keep throwing wood on there to get nice and smoky, get that bark nice and dark, and we'll check in probably at hour 8. Here we are at hour 8 on the dot, and this thing is still looking pretty good, definitely darkening up a bit. Bark is looking good, still pooling quite a bit, which is unfortunate, but again, that just kind of happens sometimes. But pretty pleased with the color thus far. And the stall is definitely a real thing on this cook. We are still at 162 in the point, and we're up to about 167 in the flat. So I'm gonna go ahead and bump these temps up to push through that stall. So I'm gonna push this back in and bump the temps up to probably about 225. Anywhere between 250 and 300 is really what I'm looking at on this thermometer. But I gotta say, I am loving this super low maintenance, stress-free cook. It has been very convenient all day. I've got a lot done because I don't need to be babying a fire so much, but yeah, we're gonna keep cooking and check back in a little bit. So we are at hour 12 on this cook now, which is a little bit longer than I was anticipating, but at hour 8, I bumped it up to 225, but it was still holding around 230, 240 on this thing. So an hour later, I bumped it up to 250, and then it actually held at 250, which is nice, except I was trying to go about 275 on that. So then I bumped it up to 275, probably about an hour ago, and that's where we're holding now, according to the thermometer on the thingy, which is good. I think around 250, 275 is where this pit likes to be really accurate with what you set it to, as opposed to the super high temps or the super low temps. But I think it's finally time to check on this thing and see how it's looking. Ooh, bark is looking very nice, still nice and smoky in there. And I did in fact shift this brisket over so the point was kind of in this hot spot where the smoke is coming out, just to get it off the direct heat of the hot pot over here. And also the point was dragging a little bit because it's so much thicker than the lean, so that's been sitting over here for the whole time. Water pan's still right beneath it. Bark is looking very nice. And we're at 180 on the dot right there. And in the flat, we're at about 182. So I think it's time to give this the old foil boat. Looking good. Busting out the trusty foil boat here, which is going to be perfect for this cook. It's going to allow this top fat to render down while collecting all the juices and tenderizing the underside, because the underside is where all the lean brisket is, which is usually the tightest and the driest. So having all the fat kind of cold-feeding this while it rests and continues to cook will be a good thing. Also, if you can tell, it's still really tight. Like, this fat hasn't rendered much at all. It's not very squishy, and we want to get that rendered down, so we want a lot of top heat coming over the top of this, as well as the fact that if I was a betting man, I did not take enough fat off during the trim, so we really want to render that down pretty well. And we have the added benefit of getting even more smoke on this thing while we bring it up to an internal temp of about 200 degrees. So at this point, I'm probably going to bump the temps up to 300 degrees to make sure we come up to temp and render this fat down and make sure everything is nice and tender. And we've only got another 20 degrees or so to come up before this brisket is at 200 and 205 degrees internal. But based on how it was just feeling, I think it's probably going to be more like an hour or two until this is actually feeling tender, which is why we're going to be probing it and feeling the underside to make sure it feels tender and not necessarily just go by the internal temp. But I'm going to crank those temps up a little bit, keep an eye on it, and we'll check back in when it's ready to pull. We are just over the 14-hour mark, and this brisket is feeling done. When I bust out the old Thermapen here, it is probing like butter, feeling incredibly tender, rocking pretty hot. We're around 206 in certain parts, 207 in the lean, which is a little bit further than I wanted to take it, or at least a little further than I usually take it. But again, I'm going by feel on this, and if we poke it, I've really just been waiting for this fat to get nice and squishy and nice and pillowy, and we are finally there, feeling like it's going to have some really good jiggle factor. Not nearly as kind of break apart as on an offset with a little bit more convection over the top, but definitely nicely rendered. And if you feel underneath, it feels just like, look at that. You can see it kind of jiggling already, feeling incredibly tender, but not falling apart, not too shreddy. So now, off the pit this comes. So at this point, we're gonna let this thing rest down at room temp till it hits an internal of about 150 or so. And I'm liking the way it's looking. Definitely got some good bark on there. Feeling really great on the bottom, kind of the underheat from that cooker. Did a great job making that underside nice and tender. Again, my only main concerns are, looks like we got a little too much fat on top here that may not have rendered down nearly enough, but I think the overnight rest should take care of that, or at least help out a little bit. The only other thing is the bark is looking a little wonky over here from pooling, but you know, sometimes you can't avoid that. Just depends on the shape of the brisket. But all in all, I'm very impressed with how this is looking and how it's smelling. But all in all, it was a pretty simple cook, really nothing to complain about there. I probably could have bumped temps earlier or cooked a little bit hotter and faster if I wanted to get this done even quicker, but I did kind of want to baby it a little bit just to make sure nothing gets too crispy or too burnt or anything like that. And 14 hours for a brisket cook is not that unheard of. Pretty par for the course as far as I'm concerned. But truth be told, I did already shoot this entire video up until this point a few weeks ago with a very similarly sized brisket, but then I had a little toaster oven malfunction and almost burned the whole house down. And if you want to learn more about what happened there, you can join teamchud.com, where I go into a little more detail about that. But that brisket, like I said, similar size, similar cook process, and that took about 12 hours, so comes down to the cut of meat, I suppose. But like I said, we're gonna rest this down to about 150 degrees at room temp and then into the food warmer at 150 to rest overnight. And after a nice long overnight heated rest, out of the warmer this thing comes. And just to recap, judging by the thermometer closest to the meat that I installed on the lid, for the first 8 hours we were cooking at about 225 degrees, For the next 2 to 4 hours, we were cooking around 250 until it came up to an internal temp of 180 degrees internal. Then I gave it the old foil boat, bumped the temps up to 275, 300-ish. That's kind of where it was swinging until it came up to 205 degrees internal, feeling nice and tender. Then I pulled it off, popped it in this tray just like this in the foil boat, let it rest at room temperature for an hour and a half until it came down to 150 degrees internal. And then I parked it in my food warmer, also set at 150 degrees, where it has been sitting for the last 15, 16 hours. And side note, unless you want to put your briskets in the warmer at like 3:30 in the morning, maybe don't get started at 11 a.m. But that's my bad. But that's kind of the name of the game for any kind of brisket you're cooking, no matter what pit you're on. It started out low and slow, nice and smoky. That way the muscles don't tighten up too quickly. And once your bark is set and everything's looking really good, then you can crank your temps to finish it off hot and fast to make sure you get good fat render. Or at least that is the theory. So let's go ahead and pull this guy out of here. Oh yeah, feeling nice and jiggly. Love that. Good thud. Feeling squishy. And if you're feeling frisky, do a little oops. Oh no, what have I done? Oh yeah, nice and juicy. But now it's time for the moment of truth. So let's go ahead and slice this thing right in half, shall we? Crunchy bark, gotta love that. Clean through the bottom, and the big reveal. Oh my God, that looks so juicy. Decent fat render on top. Guess I don't need to worry about that too much. And look at all the juice coming out of that thing. And that is a very long rested brisket, so you know this isn't just juicing out because it's incredibly hot. Bottom side looking good. Again, feeling incredibly tender when I poke it. Lean side looking good as well. Pretty happy about this so far. Hear that bark? Gotta love the foil boat. Getting into the real lean part here, still looking nice and juicy. Good smoke ring on there, always a good sign. Your ultra lean slice looking good, holding up. Really good bark on there too. Pulls right apart, gotta love that. But really, we're all here for the fatty. Zip off these burn ends real quick. Oh my God, those look so good. Would you just look at that, folks? Hard to film because it's so shiny. Incredibly tender though, nice and fatty. Really good render on that too, even on the end. Not too dry looking. And of course, nice and barky. I'm pretty pumped about this, guys. I haven't felt this confident about a pellet cooker brisket thus far, but that looks like a pretty good cook to me. Ooh, good God, what have I done? That looks really good. Kinda at a loss for words right now, folks. Good fat render on top, nice and juicy. I'm getting hungry. That looks like borderline Wagyu right there. Good God. And there it is, folks, all sliced up, looking oh so juicy, oh so smoky. Nice and barky, nice and tender. Got a couple slices of fatty and some lean. But really, it's time to find out, how did this come out? Gotta tell you, folks, I've cooked a lot of briskets on a lot of different things, you know, direct heat cookers, charcoal grills, several different types of pellet grills, but this one is definitely looking the most promising. Just look at that nice, juicy, fatty piece of brisket. I mean, good Lord, there's really nothing to complain about there. Holds up, looking nice and rendered. I know I was worried about that fat cap not being rendered well enough, but you know, that's looking pretty good to me. Nice and barky. Let's go for a nice bite of fatty, shall we? Do the little sugar cookie end bite. Whoa, that's concerningly good. I mean, come on. Nice and fatty, nice and rich, perfectly seasoned. Crunchy bark on there, nicely rendered all the way to the end. Beautiful. That is really good. Go for another one real quick. That salt level is perfection. That is a fantastic bite of some brisket right there. Oops. Let's go for the lean, shall we? We'll go for the super end cut, the nice dry guy. That's good too. Ooh, that's actually really good. Not too dry, good fat cap on there. Pulls apart nice and tender, but still holds up, as all briskets should. And the lean is definitely a little bit smokier than the fatty. But as far as the cook goes, that is just looking very nice. Look at that, perfectly cooked. That's why I always cook by feel, folks. I pulled this off at like 207 in some parts, and still nothing's shredding, nothing's overcooked. If I pulled this off at like 202, probably would not be this tender and delicious. About a minute since I had some brisket. That is phenomenal. I just can't get over how aesthetically pleasing that is to look at. That is almost picture perfect. Oops, can't forget about these little burn ends. Oh, it's like the best bite in barbecue right there. Even saltier, gotta love it. That is rich, luxurious, and perfection. I'm a little bummed out right now, to be honest with you. All these years to know this was possible on a pellet grill. Now, one thing I tell people all the time, no matter what they're cooking on, whether it's an egg or a gravity fed or a kettle, pellet grill, regardless, when it comes to brisket, there's only a few things that you actually have to nail in order to get a really good brisket. First and foremost, you need a quality brisket, which we got. USDA Prime, you can see the marbling, very good. 2 is a good trim. I think we nailed the trim on this, no complaints. 3 would be the seasoning. You gotta have the right amount of salt, you gotta have a good amount of black pepper for that beautiful Texas style bark, which we achieved. And 4, probably the hardest one, is knowing when to pull it. Like I said, getting underneath, feeling the bottom, waiting for it to be nice and squishy and rendered, feeling that fat cap to make sure that is nice and rendered, and really pulling it by feel to make sure it's perfectly cooked. Again, probably the hardest part, but I think we nailed that as well. And if you nail all those things, the only variable left is smoke flavor, which is pretty important because this is basically salt, pepper, smoke, and meat, you know what I mean? So having that proper smoke flavor is really what makes it a Texas brisket. But that being said, if I got to this stage in an oven with zero smoke, this would still be a really good piece of meat because it's properly salted and properly cooked. But as far as a true Texas style brisket, I'd say the only complaint I have is that it is still lacking a little bit of smoke. You know, it's kind of like a surface level smoke as opposed to something that's been imbued in it all day long. But again, maybe that's just not possible without burning logs down. But it is smoky, don't get me wrong. And maybe it's just my palate after cooking on offsets for 10 years at this point. But it's not enough for me to complain, you know what I mean? This is a perfectly good brisket. If I got this at a restaurant, I doubt I would even notice it. But because I'm sitting here nitpicking it with a giant offset standing behind me, that would be my one downside, is it's not as powerful of a smoke as I would like. Which is saying something, because I'm not really big into super smoky things. Like, I don't like cold smoking briskets or anything like that, but that was my first thought when I bit into this bad boy. But other than that, you know, I think we could probably remedy that if we threw a smoke tube in there, or threw a few more wood chunks in along the way. Because of the 5 things we need to nail, I think we got 4.5 of them nailed perfectly. And this is a brisket I would gladly serve anybody, which is really good to know that I can put in pretty minimal effort and come out with a brisket that I'm pretty happy with. You know, you can look on this channel, there are briskets that I pulled off the offset that look a lot worse than that. Very pleased with this. Very pleased. It is so close to being the perfect brisket. I would give this, honestly, like a 9.5 out of 10. It's tender, it's juicy, well rendered, cooked perfectly, salted very nicely. It's just 1 degree away from being perfectly smoky, so I'd call that a win. It's so good. So good! I'm doing it. Worth it. Now, I may seem a little low energy right now, and that's for 2 reasons. 1, Brooke is sleeping in that room right there, so I'm trying to keep it down a little bit. And 2, just looking at this brisket and tasting it, it's just kind of blowing my mind how good it is, and how much better it is than any other pellet grill brisket I've made in the past, and how close it is to something I'd make on this thing, and it's kind of making me rethink my whole life a little bit. I need a beer. It was just such an easy cook. But I tell you one thing, pretty pumped to have this around, because a few tweaks on this get it a little bit smokier. This is something I would gladly pass off to a friend or a neighbor or a family member or something like that, and that means I don't have to babysit this bad boy nearly as much. But that being said, I do love cooking on the offset. But we'll get into all of that when I do my final episode on my true feelings on pellet grills. But pretty pumped with how that came out. But before I go ahead and eat a whole bunch more of this, I think it's time for the official taste test. Ooh. Evan has showed up. Hello. Evan, would you like to try my pellet cooker brisket?
Yes, I would. I love brisket. Wow. Oh my gosh. Look at the render on that. You know how tender it is? Smoke ring. Crunchy bark.
Signature Leroy crunchy bark.
Oh my god, it's so beefy smelling. Do you like take a bite of like the tip over here, or like more where you get lean and fatty?
I mean, it depends on who I'm with. If I'm with a noob, I'm going right for that end cut where it's all fatty. You get that little sugar cookie end bite.
I kind of like this piece over here where you got the lean, you got the fatty, you got the bark. I kind of like to fold it up like that.
Little double texture action.
Oh, wow.
All right, full honesty. This is a pellet cooker brisket. You're number 2 in the state. The world needs to know your honest opinion.
It's not as smoky as I would have thought from a pellet grill. But it is nice and beefy. The cook on it is fantastic. I mean, that's a great brisket.
I mean, that's exactly what I was saying. Like, the salt is right, the crust is right, the bark is good, it's tender, it's cooked well.
Really good.
It's just missing, like, only just a little bit of smoke.
Just a touch. Like, do you think if you cranked the temp down in the beginning and just, like, super smoked it for a little?
I mean, I cooked it at 8 hours at 180.
Okay.
So that's pretty low.
Really?
Yeah. Which on the top rack is more like 225.
Wow.
I think, like, a smoke tube maybe might help, or throwing some more wood chunks in there, but...
That's fantastic.
It's really close, though, right?
That's really good. If I was just a backyard cook, and if I produced that, I would feel very good about myself.
That's kind of what I was just getting at a minute ago, is if I had this from the beginning of my barbecue journey, if this was the first pit I had, I don't think I would have gotten this far.
Yeah.
It's like,
done.
Oh, there it is, perfect brisket. I'm going to go learn how to play golf now, I guess.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising.
I'll take a little end piece, too.
There you go, there you go.
Oh, my God. Okay. That's great.
Crunchy bark for the win, man.
That's so good.
So you're gonna get a couple Yoders for Leroy and Lewis now, or what?
That's a no.
No, okay,
that's a negative. I'm gonna keep rolling with the Chuds.
All right, y'all, and that is it. That is how to make an absolutely fantastic brisket on the pellet grill. I highly recommend giving this one a try. I think it's pretty clear that I'm really pumped with how this one came out, and it's definitely better than any other pellet grill brisket that I've cooked. And whether you have this or any other pellet grill, I think this technique worked out really well, where you start out really low and smoky for the first long bit, making sure it doesn't tighten up too quickly. I think that water pan made a big difference as well, making sure that radiant heat from the baffle plate doesn't toast the edges or blast the underside too much with that kind of top up heat. Also, that humidity didn't hurt anything either. Bring it up to 180 degrees, gradually raising the temp throughout, and once it hits 180, give it the old trusty foil boat for the win. And then a nice hot and fast finish to make sure that bark is set nice and crispy and that fat is rendered. And then if you can swing it, the overnight rest is definitely a must for me. It really helps even the playing field and make sure you have a really nice even cook on your brisket. But again, I'm super happy with how this brisket came out. I think a few more tweaks to get a little bit more smoke flavor on there and we'd get really close to a damn near perfect brisket. And definitely something I'm gonna do again very soon. But the one tip I would suggest for anyone with any sort of pellet grill is having that external thermometer that is right where the meat is sitting. I think made the biggest difference for me on this cook as opposed to every other brisket cook I've done on a pellet grill, because I was going by that analog thermometer on the lid as opposed to what the pellet grill was telling me for the entire cook. And I think that's really what made the difference on this one. So if you can install an analog thermometer like I did on the lid, I would highly recommend it. If not, just get an air probe from an RFX or something. That way you can monitor the temps of where the brisket is actually sitting as opposed to where the probe is inside the pellet grill. I think that's really what separated this one from the rest. But all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Let YouTube know by dropping a like on this video. If you give this technique a try for yourself, be sure to tag me on Instagram at Chuds BBQ. I'd love to see what y'all are cooking. Big shout out to all the Team Chud members. Thank you for supporting this channel and allowing me to keep making all these videos. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace.